Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday morning edition of Mrs. R Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast. As usual, Saturday mornings with Brian and Anthony. Brian, it's good to see you. How are things?
Yes. Good.
And Anthony, it's like I saw you last night or something.
Yeah, it feels so long and yet so short. But no, happy to be back on Saturday mornings. Always enjoy this morning with you guys.
Cool. Well, Chad Reuter from NFL.com dropped a mock. I believe it is dated yesterday.
Yeah.
So while we were doing our 3-round mock draft podcast, he dropped an article that had a 4-round mock. So I guess we're going to go through that mock and we're going to talk about it. And this is interesting. Okay, there we go. I was about to say, like, it wasn't showing big faces. Let everybody see, like, the expressions on her face. As you go through that mock, anything stand out to you? Let's say
Wait, sorry, you cut out there, Jim. What was?
I said, does anything stand out to you in the first 2 picks? I think Cleveland is going Shedeur.
See,
not based upon boards, but based upon.
Just based on, I'd actually probably agree with you. I as much as I do love Abdul Carter, and I think that would be the right pick, in this scenario. I don't. Yeah, I think at this point, it feels like Cam Ward's 1, and Shedeur is likely 2. I'm not as confident, but it just feels like the Browns are just gonna put their eggs in the Shedeur basket, get him with Kevin Stefanski, and run that table.
Brian, how about you?
No, I actually kind of disagree. Just having knowing Corey Kinnon, he was in the draft world, of course, everybody knows, and he's a big Browns fan or whatever, and he follows a lot of stuff. From what he's said a number of times, it doesn't seem like they're really targeting a quarterback in the first round. I think they probably go with Carter, actually. So I kind of agree with the first 2 picks.
So the only thing that I would modify is that if the Browns want Abdul Carter, they should trade out with the Giants. So they may have the team and the player right, but I think if it's Browns Abdul Carter, I think it's the 3rd overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, I said it yesterday. Like, people are riding like the Titans could still trade down with the Giants. I personally, and I'm certainly no insider, but from what I've gathered, it feels like that ship has sailed. unless the Giants just absolutely just blow them away with some insane offer. I think more realistically is the Giants trading with the Browns to go get Shedeur, leapfrog any potential other team that would do that, or Cleveland themselves. And Cleveland can just go down to 3 and they still have a pick of Carter or Travis Hunter. So I think that's the more realistic scenario than the Giants getting up to 1 at this point.
Yeah. So Brian, you want to tell me about the 6th overall pick and your opinion of it?
6. Let's see who was going 6. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think Gene T. I mean, I love Gene T. I've been a Gene T guy since even last year when he was the backup to George Holani. That people don't even know who George Holani is anyway. No, I don't think you take Gene T at 6. Love the player. He's gonna put up probably 1,200 yards as a rookie, but you don't take a running back at 6. I don't think, unless there's something generational about him. And I mean, I love Gene T, but I don't think he's a generational talent type thing.
Yep. And the reason why I knew I could poke at you on that one, Brian, is because when we did the mock last weekend, you had Genty going, I believe, all the way to 20-something
years.
I don't think you take a running back in the top 10.
Not unless, like I said, not unless he's like a generational talent type thing. And like I said, for how much I love Gene T, he's the number 1 back in the draft, and he's gonna go in the first round. He's not a generational player.
Yeah. So Anthony, I'm going to ask you a question on Genty, but I'm going to reflavor it a different way. So we did a take on take episode Thursday, and one of the takes was Genty was playing in a weak conference, and when he played good teams, his production went down. Can you still justify Genty as the top running back in the class, considering the competition level and how he did when Boise State played good teams?
Well, yes. So, okay. I think overall I agree. I would argue, even though they weren't the team, they weren't as good as they'd be later. Like Oregon was still a good team in week 1. They weren't what they would become when they went 13-0, but they were still a good Big Ten team at that point. And Gene T played very well. So I don't know if I completely buy the competition argument. He did struggle in the playoff, but I think that was largely because it got to a point where these very talented rosters could literally just game plan around Ashton Jeanty and not really worry about the threat of any sort of passing attack. So I don't know if that's the fairest critique of him. My argument, I've said I believe Ashton Jeanty is worthy of a top 10 pick. And if he goes to 6 to the Raiders, I would back it. And my argument is that yes, it's a good running back class. I'm not as high on it as I think most people are. And also, we've established that the talent at the top just isn't what it normally is. And so if you're getting, and if you don't think Ashton Jeanty is this kind of player, then that's fine. But I think he is a true, pure first round grade, all around great running back. And so if you're getting what you believe is that kind of player that we think is just a plug and play, Pro Bowl kind of caliber player, and you're going to get him at the top 10 in this draft, I think it's worth taking, even if it's a position that's not as premium as edge or, offensive tackle or anything like that.
Okay. And don't hold back, but what do you think of pick number 7?
I absolutely hate it. It's given me all kinds of medical problems since I've been sitting here. Look, I've said on ad nauseum that I am not a fan of drafting any quarterback. I guess if Cam Ward fell, you could have that argument, but that's not going to happen. So any quarterback that would realistically be at 7, I'm not interested for the Jets. I think you can. I think at this point you can comfortably. I shouldn't say comfortably. You can go into the season with Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor, and a day 3, quarterback or some other random free agent, whatever, and like that can be your quarterback room for 2025, and you can see what you have in Justin Fields. Tyrod Taylor can go out and can be a competent NFL quarterback, and you let the season play out how it's going to play out. Like the Jets we're not making a playoff run this year. Like I don't know if Jets fans believe that, but it's not going to happen. So let's go with Justin Fields. Best case, he actually winds up being like what we thought he could be, and we don't have to worry about quarterback next year. And if not, it's we can go get somebody in 2026 that I think is a better quarterback class at this point. So yeah, Jackson Dart, who I believe is still a day 3 guy, and I don't care how much the media wants to gaslight me on it. He's a day 3 quarterback. Taking him at 7 would be horrible.
Okay. So we think that, Brian, we think next year's quarterback class is going to be better than this year's?
We hope.
We hope.
I mean, just because going from summer into this year, the thought was, well, it might not be great, but there's some potential there. There's some guys that they develop, and this and that. And then just some guys just didn't develop. Like Milroe started hot and then they kind of fell off, and Aller kind of was okay, man. And then he kind of went back, and so it's especially the NLI, it's hard to say. But we at least looking, a year plus ahead, it looks like next year will be better. But it's a year, so who knows?
Well, and so that was. How many of us had Tennessee picking number 1 overall 12 months ago?
I wouldn't have.
Probably nobody.
So it's funny, right? Because I have to do a draft order in the simulator, right? So as soon as the season ends, I have to create a draft order. I did have Tennessee picking number 1 last year as we exited the draft cycle. But here's the reason why I asked that question. If you had to guess the teams that are picking in the top 10 next year, are the Jets picking in the top 10 next year, Anthony?
I would say no, because I do think the coaching is going to improve, and I do think the roster is still good-ish. My only hesitancy is if New England does get a lot better and you still have Buffalo. Miami feels still kind of messy. So that I think that would be, if New England gets really good and is a playoff team and Buffalo's still what they are, then I could see them picking top 10. But talent-wise, roster-wise, I think they'll be in the 11 to 15 range would be my guess.
So, Brian, if you had to try to predict 5 of the 10 teams that are picking in the top 10 next year, who jumps into your head is even with the best draft possible, right, those teams are still probably bottom rosters?
I mean, Cleveland probably, just because they're kind of a mess. They'll probably be still in the top 10 somewhere. Tennessee might still be in the top 10 somewhere, just, rookie quarterback and all that stuff. And I mean, Cam Ward's probably going to likely struggle as a rookie just because he really should go somewhere where he can sit for a year, but that's probably not going to happen. I think just a lot depends on how the draft goes and development from some of these guys. The Raiders could still be in the top 10. I'm just looking at the draft rate in the current order. The Giants could still be in the top 10, depending on what happens. Carolina possibly, depending on what happens with development of quarterback and stuff like that. The Saints could still definitely be in the top 10, just because of their cap issues and not being able to re-sign anybody. San Francisco. San Francisco just had a fire sale basically this offseason, so they could drop into the top 10. Cardinals could be if their quarterback doesn't play better and stuff like that. So yeah, I think those are some teams that could still be in the top 10.
Yep. So I'm going to this is going to be my hot take. So I'm going to go with, here's who I'm thinking I'm going to put in the top 10. So when the draft cycle ends, I think there's a good chance that I put the Jets at number 1 in the draft order. I think, Anthony, with all due respect, and I know that we're in the same division, right? Our teams are in the same division. I definitely agree with you that New England is going to leapfrog the Jets, right? I mean, they have the quarterback in place, but I don't see the Jets as having a top, let's say, 16 roster, right? I don't think they're in the top half. I think they're closer to 1 than they would be 21 kind of thing, right? So I think it would be the Jets. I definitely like the Titans. I think no matter what happens with the Titans and their quarterback situation with Ward, Levis, whatever direction they go, I think the Titans are still going to be a top 10 draft team. I definitely like Cleveland, Brian. I love that call out. I think they're enough of a mess that I don't know that you fix that in a year, no matter how good the draft is, especially if offensive line is a problem. Offensive line doesn't usually get fixed in 1 year. It usually gets fixed in 2, meaning that if you draft rookies and they play, they'll be better year 2 than they are year 1. Another team, I definitely will agree with the Giants. I think no matter what they do, I mean, what was it? I think Locked On Scouting was debating whether the Giants are a playoff team if they're a playoff roster with the right quarterback. I don't think they are, but that was a discussion of Locked On Scouting.
What do you term as the right quarterback or whatever? You're talking about them.
Yeah, if we give them Patrick Mahomes, sure, they're a playoff team.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah, I mean, there's no rookie quarterback going to take them to the playoffs. That roster.
Aaron Rodgers is not taking them to the playoffs. Yep. So,
yeah.
Brian, I like the Raiders call out just simply from the division they're in. I think the Raiders are last place in the AFC West. And the question is that a top 10 draft pick? So I like that call out. So there was a team that you didn't mention, Brian, that I think is a bigger mess than Cleveland. Do you know who? Saints.
Well, I know I mentioned the Saints.
Yeah.
You did? Okay, I didn't hear you. My apologies.
Yeah, because I said their cap issue. They won't be able to resign anybody.
I think the Saints are the number 1 I would put in if I was making the draft order.
I could see it.
I might do that. because there's no Saints podcaster here, and I want to keep my Jets podcaster hat.
Listen, if the Jets have the number 1 pick next year, I don't think I'm necessarily complaining about it. It's again, I don't think we're a playoff team, so you might as well be the first overall pick if you're not a playoff team.
Drew Aller.
So
Drew Aller, baby, let's do it.
I'm going to give Miami as a shout out that the wheels are about to fall off. I don't know if the wheels fall off in 2025 or 2026, but I think Miami peaked 2 years ago. Right? I just don't look at the draft history of Greer, and nearly all of Miami's good players were also on the team 4 years ago. So meaning that whatever happened 4 years ago is how Miami got to where they are. They haven't really drafted well. And I think we're going to see the wheels fall off shortly. The Bengals, I'm actually thinking it's something similar, unless they can overhaul the defense quickly. That just feels like it's not a well-built roster.
Yeah, and if they lose Trey Hendrickson, it's going to be even less of a well-built roster.
Yeah.
And I'm looking now. I think the Texans, both Texas teams, I think both Dallas and Houston are going to draft closer to 10 than they do 25.
Yeah.
I mean, Dallas still has Dak and stuff like that, but probably like top 15-ish, I would say, maybe.
Well, and for me, it's more of I'm looking at, let's say, what's a balanced roster? So remember the year that Peyton Manning got hurt and the Colts drafted number 1 and they drafted Andrew Luck?
Mm-hmm.
So I think any team is capable of picking 1 overall if the wheels fall off. If you have, if Mahomes or Josh Allen get hurt, are those teams drafting in the top 10? I think it's very reasonable for Buffalo if Josh Allen misses a significant chunk of the year. I don't see, for as good as I think Buffalo's roster is, I don't think we can win. We might be able to compete every game, but I don't know that we would win enough to draft out of the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason that I was kind of going through that, because if you're in a situation like the Jets, I was doing that long thing to say, is it better to tank or is it better to stack draft assets? Meaning that is it better to try to just get an extra 1, 2, and 3 next year, or is it better to tank and try to get the quarterback? Brian, if you had to pick a way to get one of the quarterbacks next year, do you think it's better to tank or do you think it's better to stack draft assets?
Probably just with how it, like I was saying earlier about NIL, probably just tank just because quarterbacks are staying in college longer. They're going back because they're getting, $1 million a year for NLI or $2 million a year or whatever. So a lot of these quarterbacks are going to stay 4 or 5 years nowadays instead of coming out at 3, unless they're number 1 guarantee type of stuff. So I think going forward you're probably going to see a couple quarterbacks go in the very top 5 or whatever every year, and then there's going to be no quarterbacks going until the second round, third round, and stuff like that. So I think just with NLI, it's going to push quarterbacks up.
What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if the question is what is a better path, if the goal is solely to get a franchise quarterback, then I guess tank is the answer. And obviously, we know teams aren't going to actually do that, but in theory. Right. But I think if the question is what's a better way to build a championship roster that can compete and be a playoff team for years to come, then I would say you'd want to stack draft assets instead of just focusing on getting the first overall pick. I mean, how many number 1 overall picks are we seeing compete for Super Bowls and or at least lead playoff teams? It's not, the best quarterbacks in the league right now are not number 1 overall picks, except for I guess Joe Burrow, but they're first round picks, but they're not number 1 overall. Mm. So it feels like if the goal is only get a franchise quarterback, getting the first overall pick doesn't really guarantee you that, because you need to set them up with a path to success.
Okay. So I am of the team building theory, and Brandon Beane is the one that convinced me of this. You stack draft assets and then you trade them. So for Buffalo to get Josh Allen, Buffalo traded 3 times. Well, okay, I should actually say Buffalo traded 5 times. We traded back to allow the Chiefs to get Mahomes, and that trade back yielded us a first-round pick. We traded Sammy Watkins for a second-round pick I believe we traded him to the Rams. We traded Tyrod Taylor to the Browns for a third-round pick. So Brandon Beane went into a draft with 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds. Then we traded Cordy Glenn and a first-round pick to move up in the first round, because Buffalo's first-round pick was so far back that nobody's going to trade from 7 back into the 20s. So we traded Cordy Glenn and a first-round pick to get to the 11th or the 12th overall. And then we went from 12th overall up to 7 to get Josh Allen. And we had to trade 2 second-round picks plus our first round. So it was a 1 and 2 twos to move up 5 spots in round 1 to go get Josh Allen. Right? So that's what I mean by stacked draft assets. I think that's the better way to do it than to try to purposely lose every game, because New England felt like they were tanking, and one game prevented them from picking in the top 3. And it's because they did not beat Buffalo they beat Buffalo the last week of the year. And I think that was strategic for Buffalo to lose that game. So New England wasn't picking in the top 3. Like Buffalo didn't want Abdul Carter to be on New England kind of thing. So my opinion there. Okay. Back to mocking the mock. I'm looking to see. I don't see too many surprises through pick 14, 15. Jahdae Barron to Miami seems weird. Why would Miami go corner?
Yeah, and especially in a trade down scenario. So we're then saying that they're going to let Denver get Tyler Warren in this trade. But then, oh no, I'm sorry, they traded with Arizona. But they're going to pass on offensive line. They're going to pass on, a Colston Loveland type. They're not going to get any help on the defensive interior, even though like Kenneth Grant, I think, is still around in the scenario. So Jahdae Barron's a good player. I still don't really love him as like a top 15 player, even though it feels like everybody else does. But yeah, I guess I get it. I feel like they also need like more of a safety than a corner. So it's like if Jahdae Barron's going to be a safety, then I guess, but that feels like not maximizing his value. So I don't. Yeah,
and and in this mock they took Xavier Watson round 2. So
yeah, which I like.
I don't think Barron's the safety. I'm just saying.
Right. Yeah. So you're revamping the secondary, which I did mention. I said yesterday, like cornerback is very important in the modern NFL, and I believe that. But you also need to. There's other issues in Miami that's not the secondary that I would be addressing with.
I think that has to be either trench. But Brian, what do you think of Jahdae Barron specifically to Miami?
Yeah, kind of like what Anthony said. It's kind of a weird pick. Kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, he's more of a slot / safety type guy, and then when he comes to the NFL, I mean, everybody talks about how he played outside this year, but he's still his arms are under 30 inches. That's really short for a corner, especially outside corner. He'll probably play some outside, but I mean, he's going to be mostly in the slot, probably play some safety. It doesn't make sense to take a guy that's going to play that role in the NFL in the top almost 15 and top 16. I don't think you make that pick at 16. I mean, you have a number of guys you have. I mean, I don't think they really need him, but I mean, guys like Michael Williams, Ted McMillan's still there, Shamar Stewart's still there. Just some other guys there that I think would make more sense, that are better value picks and would make more of an impact. Even if you want to take a safety, we could take Imamori, if anything. I wouldn't take him that high personally, but I mean, you could do that. I mean, that would at least make more sense. The pick just doesn't make sense.
And then I think the other thing we skipped 14 for the Colts. So if Shamar Stewart is there for the Colts and he's not the pick, I don't think anybody in the draft community has learned anything about how the Colts draft. So Colston Loveland doesn't match who the Colts draft. One of the reasons I love the draft professors is I can listen to Brian, and Brian's going to give us a clinic on who the Packers draft. And Brian, I don't know how many other draft professor podcasts you watch, but you do resonate, because if people are doing a mock draft for the Packers, they're going to be like, I hope Brian likes my pick. Right? We learn from each other about, how should the Jets draft or how should the Packers draft? Same thing with the Colts. The Colts are actually the easiest NFL team to predict the draft picks for. And it's amazing how this person didn't get that right. I will put money that Colston Loveland doesn't get drafted by the Colts. I can think of like 4 or 5 players Emimori, Shamar Stewart, Derek Harmon probably meets those athletic thresholds. Maybe a
Yeah.
Maxwell Harrison.
Harrison probably would, yeah.
Yeah. So there's other players that meet the Colts testing thresholds better than Colston Loveland, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're somewhat similar to the Packers. They like just freaky athletes in the first round. So that's something actually I did research on like a few years ago. I was just looking into other teams, and yeah, they like to draft freaky athletes in the first round.
Yeah, and actually interesting. So Brian, there's a thread that I'm in with David from Philadelphia Eagles News. I think you should get with David offline because he doesn't post a lot of his stuff publicly. He'll share it with the research he's doing, but he's doing some of the same research and he has his own app.
Interesting.
To try to predict what that is. So you might even be able to help him just feed in how Green Bay does it, for example, with some of the information that you have. Okay. Dallas at 20. I like Egbuka to Dallas. I'm hearing a lot of people mock Egbuka to Dallas. What do you think, Anthony, of Emeka Egbuka in Dallas?
Yeah, so I like in this scenario, I like it. If Dallas was still at 12 and took Egbuka, that's probably too rich. But in this scenario, if you move down, I presume you're probably not getting another first. But if you're adding like a second round pick, which Dallas does not have a ton of draft capital, so if you're adding like a second round pick this year or next year, and still getting Egbuka to put with CeeDee Lamb, I think that is I like that a lot. One of the things I always say with mocking trades and mock drafts is if I'm going to do it and if I'm going to critique it, I want it to be a reasonable trade that both teams would make. So like this trade, I could see Denver moving up for Tyler Warren because I do think most people view him as a guy that's not getting past 15. So and Dallas is a team that would want to move down. So this trade to me makes sense for both sides. But yeah, if Dallas walks out with an extra draft pick and Egbuka, I think that's a good day.
Yeah. So Sam, I see that concern. I'm seeing a lot of buzz of Egbuka to Dallas. So
yeah, but I mean,
go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, sorry. No, what he's saying makes sense because that's mostly what Egbuka is going to be doing in the NFL is playing in the slot. They're different players, but I've been saying that he's going to play a similar role to JSN in the NFL. It's a little bit different, and I think he has a little bit more size, a little bit more physicality where he can play some more on the outside versus JSN, but I think it's still going to be somewhat of a similar role. Like I think I looked it up. JSN played like 70-something%. I want to say around 75% in the slot as a rookie. And I think that's probably about what you're going to see with Egbuka, 70-75% in the slot, and then like obviously the rest on the outside.
Okay. So it is Pittsburgh taking Omarion Hampton. My only comment is my predictive pick is Pittsburgh's going to take Jalen Milroe. Like all signs point to the Steelers were enamored with him at the pro day. I may not be the GM that takes Milroe at 21, but I don't think Pittsburgh can go any direction other than quarterback in round one. It's either going to be Dart or Milroe.
I don't know. It's tough because it feels like it goes against Milroe, especially. I feel like goes against everything that the Steelers would if they draft a quarterback in the first round. It doesn't feel like they would want a project, especially could like their quarterback right now is Mason Rudolph. Like that's who they're gonna throw into the season like as their starter. So you're gonna like after years of this sort of like purgatory, if you will, of just like not being a legitimate playoff threat, you're gonna like say, well, now we can just like reset and like take Jalen Milroe, go with Mason Rudolph. You want to talk about a team that would be picking in the top 10? I listen, Mike Tomlin's great and Pittsburgh's still got good players, but their roster is not as good as it's been in years past. And if you're going to roll out Mason Rudolph as your guy, I don't see it. I don't think it's going to work out well.
It's actually a good call out for Pittsburgh to be drafted in the top 10, Anthony. That was a team I hadn't thought of. That's a good call.
Okay.
Hey,
Depending on what happens to Rodgers.
Hey, Sam, it's good to see you here. We had a discussion a little while ago of predict the teams drafting in the top 10 next year. I'd be curious which teams you pick and if they matched ours. But Brian, what do you think of both pick 21 and pick 23?
Yeah. So Hampton, I mean, I agree with what Anthony's saying, but also at the same time, or add on to that, I should say, taking Hampton at 21, I just don't see it happening. It doesn't make sense. Great player, but again, like the value for running back is not there. His ankles are a little stiff. He's a little bit of a straight line runner. He's not really a guy who's going to create for you. He's a physical runner, of course. He's going to get you yards after contact. He's got decent vision. He's got good vision and stuff like that. He's not a big threat of the backfield. He can do dump offs and screens and stuff like that, but he's not going to be a big receiving threat for you. So you're like, what he can do for you is not that he's a bad player. I'm not trying to trash on him, but he's a good player. He's a really good player. It just, what he's going to be able to do for you is kind of more limited in the sense of like, it doesn't make sense to take him in the first round. Gene T makes sense, of course, because he can impact the game through all kinds of ways and all this different stuff. But Hampton's not really a receiving threat. He's not going to create for you. He's not going to, break tackles in the sense of like juking guys or spinning guys or anything like that. It's just going to be through yards after contact. And those type of guys, they tend not to last long in the NFL. They tend to last 4, maybe 5 years at the best, if he's lucky. So it doesn't make sense to take a guy like that at 21. He's like a early to mid second round pick, probably like a mid second round pick. So him going there doesn't make sense.
23 Green Bay.
What's that?
Pick 23 to Green Bay. What do you think?
Oh, I thought you said 22. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. That's just not how the Packers are and how they draft. I saw that. I saw this mock yesterday, actually. Yeah, I've said it a million times. They're not going to take a receiver in the first round. That's just not how they operate. Despite what Brian Gutekunst said recently I think it was at the Combine press conference, he's like, "Oh, we have no problem drafting wide receiver in the first round." Well, you haven't drafted one in the first round in basically 30 plus years. If you remove Javon Walker, who was drafted by Mike Sherman, who was not a disciple of Ron Wolf and Ted Thompson and those guys. If you take out Javon Walker, it's like 30-ish plus years since they've taken receiver in the first round. So it just seems more like he's Gutekunst just saying that just to influence other teams to think that the Packers may take a wide receiver in the first, which they won't. And this is just not the draft class to take a receiver in the first round, especially if you're picking later in the first round. Golden, again, like good player. I like him a lot. If the Green Bay traded down to like the top of the second round and took him, I'd be okay with it. I'd be fine with it. But at the 23, it just doesn't make sense. There's other players who would fit better and other players who would be higher up on their board. That would make sense at 23.
Yep. So Anthony, what do you think of Golden going 23rd overall as wide receiver 3?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what Brian's saying, and if the question is purely predictive, then I probably would agree. Just purely in terms of like value and the fit, I think it would be a good pick. I think he brings kind of an element that the Packers don't really have, which is just like a route runner that can win at all 3 levels. Christian Watson, we're hoping would be that, but I don't think you can rely on him. And honestly, I would maybe consider moving him if they actually did draft like a Golden here. And in terms of him being wide receiver 3, I think that's fair. I think he's my wide receiver 2, but like him and Egbuka are like very close together. So, interchanging one or the other, I think is fine. Honestly, I probably would like Golden in Dallas better. I think he would be a better fit because he can play more on the outside and again can win at all 3 levels. So I would maybe change that. But, again, Igbuka and Golden are close. So I think it's fair where he is here.
Okay. So I have a question about your cornerback boards. If Buffalo trades up to 24, which I think is highly reasonable, and they're trading up for a corner, which I think is highly probable, who would be the corner you would take at 24?
I mean, Azariah is fair. 24 is a tad rich for me, but like I get it, and I understand why you would want to move up for him. I've always been a huge Darian Porter guy, just because I think his athletic skill set is rare. But I don't even know if I would move up for him necessarily. Honestly, I probably wouldn't move up for any corner in this draft if we're being honest, because I think they're all, the best ones I think have some sort of question mark that is, I think, too big. I guess unless like Will Johnson falls here, then sure, yeah, you want to move up for him. But even he has questions that I think would make me nervous to do that. I think the corner class is good, but I don't think in the Bills case, like the corner you could get at 30, it's not like, I don't think moving up 6 spots for Azariah is like really that worth it, unless you think Azariah is just like an awesome, definite first round guy, which I personally don't.
Brian, how about you? What corners would you trade up for?
I think what I'm curious about then is what kind of coverage does Buffalo play mostly?
So we tend to play cover 3.
Oh, okay.
Mostly. However, we've shifted to cover 2. Okay, so McDermott's base scheme is a cover 3.
All right.
They did shift to a cover 2 a little bit more when Poyer and Hyde left, because we lost some athleticism at safety, so we couldn't go single gotcha. Safety.
Okay, because the corners you're picking down here at the bottom-ish of the first round, they have different strengths and weaknesses, obviously. As far as different what do you call it, cover schemes and cover skills. Actually, I kind of think since you guys do play a lot of cover 2 and cover 3, Darian Porter might be a better fit, just because that's what he's good at. He's really good. He's a really good cover zone corner. Sorry. His man cover skills, he's not as good, and he's still developing as a corner, so that's going to need some time to develop. So I think going to a coverage scheme that fits his skills better would be a good fit. But I think Azariah Thomas would fit too, because Florida State played a lot of cover 1 and cover 3, and he was good in cover 3 as well. So I think he would fit too. So I think those would be options. I think even Amos would be an option, because he's played multiple schemes. He's played at 3 different schools, 3 different different cover schemes. So he's pretty versatile, where he can play man, cover 2, cover 3, whatever you ask, he can do. So I think those would be 3 good options.
Yep. So Thomas or Amos would be my prediction if we traded up for a corner. But I'm of the opinion, with the way that this board is, if Golden did go at 23, so there's 7 picks here between where Buffalo picks. I'm like, well, Amos is on the board, Thomas is on the board, Harmon hasn't been picked, Grant hasn't been picked. I'd be like, well, you could stay put, and you've got 4 guys. So I haven't scrolled past 24 yet. What do you guys think of Ariante Ursary going in round 1? Do you guys have a first round or close to a first round grade on him? Brian, you smile.
No, I mean, kind of. I mean, like we've talked about many times before, this draft class, there's like probably about 15-ish guys with first round grades. Everybody else has like second round grades, basically. So you're taking the bottom of the first round. Everybody you're taking is going to have a second round grade, basically, unless somebody slips out of nowhere type of thing. So him going here, I mean, it's a little rich for my blood, but like it's not that bad. Like I have, I see him going I kind of see him going in like the top of the second round. So I'm going at 25, and with how this class is, it's okay. Who else is available? I mean, maybe they could have taken Booker or something like that, but like, yeah, it's okay. I think it's fine. It's maybe a slight reach, but like not much, and they really need offensive line bats, so it's an okay pick, I guess.
Okay, so I have flipped around 2 of the mock, and the first thing I'm going to say is that if the draft fell this way, Derek Harmon and Kenneth Grant did not get picked in round 1. Unless I missed something, I did not see either player go in round 1 of this mock.
Yeah.
No, because I just found where Kenneth Grant wound up, and I'm pretty stoked. So
So my instinct would be, if the draft played out this way, Buffalo has more than enough ammo to move up in round 2, and Buffalo would be like, I'm looking at the teams. It would be, where did Kenneth Grant go?
42.
42. So I can see that, and then Tyleek went the pick right after, and then where did Derek Harmon go? Did I miss him?
No, he went 34 to the Giants.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Oh yeah, there is. Yeah.
So I'm looking at. So I like seeing Jalen Noel go at 47.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot and good value. Arizona makes sense.
I will point out that this mock draft has the Atlanta Falcons picking an offensive player. It doesn't matter who. Atlanta, I think, only met with defensive players at the combine. So I'm just saying, like, if we're trying to be predictive as to what happens, I don't think Atlanta is picking a center in round 2.
They need one though.
They do need one. Yeah.
Do they?
They lost.
Yeah, they lost their center teams. Yep.
They gotta get a center.
Yeah, and it's a weak center class as far as at the top. So it's like Wilson and then everybody else basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
So Brian, what do you think of Nick? Or first of all, Anthony, do you want to comment on Kenneth Grant to the Jets? Because we hinted at it, but we didn't specifically talk about it.
Yeah, Kenneth Grant. If he falls to 42 and the Jets get him, we're throwing a party. I've come around to the idea, if the Jets took him at 7, I would probably be okay with it. Like I think he's that good. Like he is the best nose tackle, like pure nose tackle in this draft, in my view. I don't think there's any reason he shouldn't be a round 1 pick unless there's like something we don't know about. So yeah, getting him at 42 fills a need. You put him next to Quinnen. That is a scary interior to deal with. So it wouldn't make up for Jackson Dart, but like it would really help.
And then Brian, you want any comments on pick 54 of Nick Scourton to Green Bay?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to fall that far, but I would love that pick. He's, that'd be a great pick in Green Bay. I mean, that'd be basically Green Bay winning off of, Texas A&M basically asking him to bulk up this past season and him dropping because he's dropped weight and he looks like he's back to his old Purdue, athleticism or whatever it is. So, and he's a great fit as far as what the Packers like with their edge rushers. Plus, he offers something more that some of them don't have. He's got probably more bend than most of the edge rushers that the Packers have in their roster right now. Despite being a bigger guy, he's pretty bendy. He's got that pretty sick spin move and stuff. So, he'd be awesome picking Green Bay. I'd love to have him in Green Bay.
Okay. So I could probably be convinced that Buffalo picking Kevin Winston, the safety out of Penn State at 56. If you ask me a year after we make the pick, I might like it better than the year we make it. Right? So I don't know if Winston's going to be ready for camp. Buffalo does need another safety to put on the other side of Colt Bishop. But I don't know if I'm ready to take a player coming off of injury at 56, especially because I think I could come up with 4 other safeties that might be available at the top of round 4, because Buffalo has a really early 4th round pick. So I don't know about Winston. And then Buffalo had another pick, and I'm like, okay, this one's clueless. Why would you draft Xavier Restrepo when you have Khalil Shakir? Right?
Yeah,
like,
Yep.
I could think of several other wide receivers. Like if Jack Besh is on the board here, I could think, okay, yes, Buffalo needs a wide receiver, but I don't even think Restrepo is not a downfield threat. He's not a man beater. And ultimately, the receiver that Buffalo drafts is either going to be somebody that gets downfield or somebody that can beat press man covered. Matthew Golden does both. I would love for that Green Bay pick that was Golden to be Buffalo's pick. But it has to be a very specific type of receiver. You can't just throw any receiver on Buffalo because we have some guys with very defined roles. We would be looking to either get a boundary player to move Keon Coleman to power slot. We're looking for a downfield guy, somebody that can beat press man. So not a fan of the Restrepo pick to Buffalo. Okay, I have a question. What do you guys think of the Eagles taking a running back at 64?
You know what? I'll be honest. I don't. Well, okay. I don't think it should be Jaden Blue, but I don't necessarily hate it. I do. I would question it. Obviously, you have Saquon, and it seems like they actually like Will Shipley, who I also was fairly high on, at least compared to consensus. But they love having running back depth and guys that they can rotate. And I mean, listen, Saquon's not getting younger, so I guess if you want to like really plan for the future, but I don't. I wouldn't do it at 64. If you did it at 90, whatever they would be picking or something like that, I'd be a little more like, okay. But no, they're going to want to add depth either in the secondary or in the wide receiver. I think is a pick here that you could make. I wouldn't go running back here.
I will buy anybody listening to this podcast dinner, including my two esteemed co-hosts, if the Eagles take a linebacker, safety, or running back on day 1 or 2. I'd be willing to bet money that the Eagles are selecting premium positions.
Yeah.
So, Brian, remember that chat I mentioned to you with David from Philadelphia Eagles News?
Yep.
So his app is basically tracking every GM's draft tendencies. And one of the things he's impressing upon me is how close Brandon Beane is to Howie Roseman. The only difference is Beane hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. But they're like neck and neck with how they draft. Right? Yeah. Beane will go to a couple of other positions because like James Cook was a second-round pick. So Beane will do a few maybe non-premium positions on day 1 and 2. But generally speaking, the draft success of Roseman and Beane. But anyways, it's not going to be for the Eagles. It's not going to be a safety, linebacker, or running back, according to me. I have a different way to do round 3. Could you guys go through round 3 and plant a flag on any player that you think should have been taken in round 2? Like that you had so much higher on your board. And like 10 spots, not a big deal. But if you've got somebody significantly higher that was taken in round 3, anybody stick out?
I'm looking now.
Yeah.
Princely Uman Ellen shouldn't be here.
You said Princely?
I said Princely, yeah.
So Princely in this mock went 85 to Denver. So,
yeah,
so I think the players should be rated higher. And as far as Denver fans have communicated to me, edge is the one position they're very comfortable with on their roster.
Yeah.
They would be more likely to go interior than edge. They do need interior defensive line. Edge, while Princely would be great value on the board there at 85, Princely should have gone higher, according to me as well. Brian, where do you guys have Landon Jackson? Just out of curiosity.
I think about where he went.
Yeah, this is about.
See,
Okay.
Yeah, top of third. Yeah, it's about where I had him.
Yeah, he's 81 for me. So yeah, this is
Okay.
pretty close. Honestly, these are all pretty. Like these all feel like third round players, really, for the most part. Like none of these are really like that stunning.
Far off.
What do you guys think of pick 92? Chandler Martin, linebacker to Seattle.
That's a reach.
It's a reach.
Okay. How high do you have Martin?
I have a day 3 or I'm like a mid day 3 grade on him, like 4th, 5th round.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in the same. He's like a 5th round guy for me, and I like Chandler Martin. Like I think he's a guy that isn't talked about enough.
Right.
He's had a pretty solid process. He played at the Hula Bowl.
I think so. Yeah.
But 80 or 93, whatever it was, not 92.
Yeah.
Chandler Martin was the second player ever that reached out to this channel. So Andreas Keaton was the first.
Right.
Chandler Martin was the second. And this was early November. We had just gotten started. Right? Like at that point, I don't even know that we had 5 podcasts. I don't know that we had Monday through Friday covered yet.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting because Jake and Josh were doing running backs and linebackers on Mondays. And let's say on Friday, I said, we're going to add Chandler Martin to Monday because he reached out to Bill Sparks. So Josh, did what Josh does. And he says, I'm glad that you pointed him out because this is a really good linebacker.
Yeah.
And I think Martin was like 14th or 15th on Josh's linebacker board when we finished midseason scouting. So,
I mean, honestly, in this linebacker class, like he's a good linebacker in this class. I still 92 is aggressive.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of Kyle Kennard going at pick 99? Is that about where you have him?
I have him higher.
I have him higher too.
How much higher?
Let's see.
64 for me. So yeah, this is another one of those late or steals, I guess you'd say. Like, and the Giants are another team. Like, I feel like everybody yells at people when you give them Abdul Carter, or at least Giants fans do, because it's like, oh, edge is the one thing we don't need because we have Brian Burns and Thibodeau. So if the Giants are another one where it's like, I don't think they'd be in the market for an edge. I mean, I guess they could, but like, I don't know if Kennard would be the pick for them in the same way that Uman Mielen would be, in that it's just a value. You're getting such good value, you might as well take the player. But edge is not a big need for them really either.
Okay, so now we're going into round 4 of the mock, and I do like a mock that goes into round 4. I'm just going to say, like, from a, let's say, managing content standpoint, one of the things when I started this channel that I wanted us to be able to do was talk about guys in rounds 3, 4, and 5 more. I think that there's a lot of players that deserve discussion that will be NFL starters in that range. And I'm looking at round 4 of this mock. Alec Iomanner fell to round 4. What do you guys think of Iomanner? Like, how high is he on your board?
Yeah, I'm not as high on him as other people are, but I think that's still a bit. I think, I have a 3rd round grade on him, so that's a bit later than I would take him, or I think he should go. I have a mid 3rd on him, so I think that's a bit of a weird drop. That doesn't. I don't see that happening.
And my opinion is there weren't a lot of wide receivers that went in the top 100 of this, because I didn't see Ty Felton's name. I didn't see Did I see both Jalen's go? I saw Noel. Did I see the now I'm already trying to remember.
Royal? I saw Royal went in third.
Royals went okay.
Yeah,
Royals went in third.
I think he was literally the last. He was the last pick in the third
yeah.
round.
Okay. Harold Fannin went in round 4 to Jacksonville. How high do you guys have Fannin?
I think I have a third.
Yeah, I have a third. He's why can't I find him on here?
Yeah, I have a third on him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's hovering in like the 90s range, so
Okay.
a little bit of a fall, but not crazy.
Right.
Okay. Jacob Parrish went at 111. How high do you guys have Parrish?
I'm not a big Jacob Parrish guy, and I know like some people have like fallen in love with him over the past like couple months. I have him as like a fourth, fifth round sort of like fringe guy. So like this is, I think a reasonable spot for him.
Yeah.
But like some people have him as like a top 100 player, like definitely, and I don't get that.
Yeah, I agree. I think mid fourth round ish,
Okay.
whatever it is. That's top of the fourth or whatever. That range is. I think it's about where you should go.
I'm looking to see if any of the other, like I think almost all the fourth round picks I'm looking at to me look moderately reasonable. I think my only comment is there were a lot of linebackers that went in the first 4 rounds of this mock. A lot. I didn't count, but already going through the 4th round, I think I saw 3 or 4. There were already 2 or 3 that went in round 3 that I didn't think would go in round 3 either. So it felt like this was a very linebacker heavy. And I never saw, did you guys see Demetrius Knight go in this mock?
I don't remember seeing him. I think one player that's fallen to the 4th that I think is kind of insane. Wyatt Milam is going 121. Like that. Like I know he cooled off a bit. We've established I think he's a guard in the NFL. But the way he played this past year, and he's fallen to 121. He's going after some guards that or tackles that would project a guard that I don't think he should be going after. So yeah, 121 for Wyatt Milam is nuts. He's like 60 something on my board, like high 3rd round pick.
Brian, anybody else sticking out in round 4 that you want to call out?
I got a couple that I don't understand the picks. Tyler Batty in the 4th. From BYU, I don't understand that pick. I mean,
No.
He ran a fast 40 time, so I think he got bumped up just because of that. But because if you watch his film, he's not that great. He's okay. Like he's not a terrible player, but like I have like a 5th, 6th round grade on him. He's a guy who's going to come in, he can stop the run and he'll maybe chip in a couple sacks, 2-3 sacks a season. One of those type of guys. I think that's a bit of a reach in the 4th round. That's about a round, 2 rounds early. And then Dylan Gabriel going the 4th round. I don't really understand that. I mean, I guess he's somewhat similar to Tua, but like physically, but like, I don't know. I think his NFL upside is like an okay backup. And that's, but I don't think you take him in the 4th round. I think he's a 5th, 6th round pick because at best he's an okay backup. At worst, he's out of the NFL in 2-3 years. I don't think you take a guy in the 4th round that has that low of a floor.
Got it. Anything else that you want to point out, Anthony?
No, I like there's a couple running backs that are in this 4th round that I think are like they're really good, and I mean it's nothing really that surprising, but like RJ Harvey at 112 is a nice value for a player of his talent. Bashul Tutin at 136 to the Chiefs is a really, really solid pick for them. Gives them kind of like a nice yin to the yang of Pacheco. And their offense doesn't really have that sort of game breaker running back that Tutin can be. And even Scatabo at he's at 122 to Denver. I didn't drink the Cam Scatabo Kool-Aid when he was making his playoff run. But I like this spot. I like this value for him. Sean Payton, I feel like, can have fun with him and use him in multiple different ways in the offense. So yeah, the round 4 running backs in this mock are all really good picks in my opinion.
Yep.
So I want to definitely call out Chad. I hope it's Reuter. I hope that's how you say your last name, Mr. Reuter. Anybody that puts out a 4-round mock, I have a significant amount of respect for you. Very few even put out a 3-round mock. But my opinion is the draft community needs to be able to be pushing out 4 and 5-round mocks, talking about the top 175 players, because there's starters littered in this mock in rounds 3 and 4 that do not get a lot of media or podcast time. So I want to applaud you. If you catch any part of this episode and you hear this soundbite, I have a lot of respect for putting that out. So we might be mocking the mock and criticizing some picks, but any of us that make mocks, like, oh, by the way, guys, Brian, you should check out the YouTube feed of the mock that we did last week. YouTube does a really good job of letting us know when they don't like our mock picks.
Oh, really?
You don't see them on Twitter, you see them on YouTube. I'm just letting you know. The YouTube feeds. So people criticize mocks. When we do them, it happens. Chad, when you did it, we used it as a full 1-hour podcast. So thank you. Yep. Anthony, do you want to take a moment, introduce yourself to our fine audience?
Yeah. Anthony Russo at Anthony_Russo97 on X. I've just started diving into 2026 players, if you can believe that. So I'm gonna try to start posting clips. It's not really something I usually do, but I'm gonna start doing that hopefully soon. And I'm gonna have an updated my final big board and my final mock draft will probably come out beginning of April. Follow me on X for all that good stuff.
Right.
So see my at BMoffy NFL, of course, on X. I got what's it called? You can find me on here, of course, and then also I'm writing for the Cheesehead TV Draft Guide. I just submitted my final edge rankings a couple days ago, so I finished that. And of course, I submitted my article for them too a while ago, so I'm all done with that. I was kind of trying to grind that out, so I wasn't able to really do much else other than that. This that that's done, I'm going to get back to finishing up my positional rankings. So I'll start putting up my final positional rankings probably this coming week. I got to do interior offensive line and then defense, of course. So you can find me there and doing that stuff. And then, of course, I post clips on X. Again, because I was trying to finish up the draft guide stuff. I was kind of neglecting clips and stuff. So I'll try and get back to posting clips and stuff like that on Twitter there too. And then I'm also on Blue Sky. And then I think that's about it. And then my writing is on Gridiron Heroics, so you can find that stuff there.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for watching. You can follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. It is the same on X, Twitter, and YouTube. We have also started a Twitch stream, so you can catch our podcast there. The single best thing that you can do to say thank you for this content is to hit subscribe on YouTube. We have daily draft content. This podcast is our only one on Saturdays, and we only have one on Sundays. But every other day of the week, we do 2 podcasts a day. So you'll see 2 on Monday, 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 and 10 p.m. Eastern Tuesday, and then 7 and 9 p.m. on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We push out draft content every day Could be mock drafts, positional evaluations. We'll bring on guests. We've interviewed a few different players on the channel, things of that nature. So if you're a fan of the draft and you want to learn more about the draft, this channel covers it a lot of different ways that others do not. So please and thank you. We have 48 podcasters, just like Anthony and Brian at the Draft Professor. We have multiple people pushing the content out. We are comparing notes so that when anybody does a mock draft for the Packers, we know to listen to Brian. And when we do a mock draft for the Jets, we listen to Anthony. And when people do mock drafts for the Bills, they don't listen to me. So, but we appreciate everybody watching. Sam, it's definitely good to see you in the chat as always. For everybody else, it's Draft Professor. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.
Yep.